got Skype ringing right now. He did, and there was an ice storm, so maybe a second or two before we log on. Jeff Harness. Jeff, can you hear me now?
I sure can.
Hey, welcome to the Edge Television broadcast.
And glad to be here.
Man, I'm sorry. I don't know if you were watching the show. I had a moment of silence there. I was telling the folks, went out to feed the chickens and I had 5, and there's a big old red-tailed hawk eating one of my chickens, and I had to had a moment of silence for my chicken.
Oh, well, I feel for you. I've kind of been there with the critters eating some of the other critters before. It's just kind of the way nature works.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but people are always saying, "Hey, when they stop laying eggs, are you going to eat them?" I said, "Man, that's like eating your dog, man." I mean, you don't eat your dog when your dog goes to the sweet dog house in the sky. I mean, but now other people have different opinions, and we can discuss that, especially when we're talking about surviving, and you may have to eat a pet when you're in a survival mode. But Jeff, welcome to the program. Hey, we're going to be talking with you tonight about the Ozark Project for Survival. And so, since you're new to the program, and I know as we're talking about the microtown that's in process, I really want to see if we've got any tips for the folks about basic survival. But before we do, as we get into it, if you don't mind, introduce yourself to the Edge audience, and how'd you get into even the concept of developing a microtown?
Sure. I mean, it didn't start off this way for me. I mean, the most important thing about what I do is that I'm a husband and a father. And for me, it started off like it does for so many people and so many people that we've talked to, that I got to the point a little more than 2 years ago where I decided that everything that I was looking at was just making me sick in my stomach, because I felt like I was helpless to protect my family, because there were so many things that could potentially go wrong with the way things are today, and I was left vulnerable. I was living in the suburbs outside of St. Louis, nice little quiet town, sort of the same town that I grew up in, just the bigger version of it, 20-something years later. And to put it bluntly, I was freaking out. I would be up at 3:30 in the morning watching stuff and saying, okay, I'm going to watch this one more YouTube video about UN trucks running through the streets of Alabama, and then I'm going to go to sleep, and then 15 minutes of that, and then another thing came up. And so, Daniel, that's when I ran across you, is all these late nights of people blowing the whistle on there's something evil afoot, and it certainly isn't something that we've done. I mean, we're not allowed to go to those meetings and get in on the decisions that affect the rest of us. And so, coming to that conclusion that we're going to be left on our own, I had to come up with something that would allow me, my wife, peace in our home, so we could continue working and sleep at night and know that we're moving toward a solution for this. And so, you and I are just meeting voice to voice here for the first time this evening. But you had asked me, can you send in a picture and a bio? And, just like all of us, I've done a lot of things in life, and I could probably put a bio together. I'm just a failed football player, and I got close to getting paid to play on Sundays, but not close enough to start putting paychecks in the bank. And for me, I was lost for a while, because I was so sure that God had put me on this earth to give kids a good role model as far as a guy that lives a clean life, that is bigger and stronger and faster than all these guys that are out there playing. And I was just sure that was my reason in life. And when that didn't work out, fast forward several other years, I kind of built up a decent skill set in an old career that I had, but that was left flat once I got on my journey. In 2012, in August, I was watching a documentary about fiat money on, I don't know, one of those history channels, A&E, something like that. And I mean, I remember the name of it, but I don't want to say it on your program. But that's where it started for me in August of 2012. Mm-hmm. And fast forward to August of 2014, and I took the step of kind of going public with the idea that everybody seems to be missing the mark with just working themselves up in a frenzy that something's wrong, and it doesn't seem like we're doing enough about it individually to get ready for things. And so in a bio, honestly, my bio would be I'm a father and a husband, and I'm trying to help people get to that calmness in life where that maybe you have a few more steps to take before you can say I'm ready. I mean, none of us truly are ready, and until that event comes to know whether we're going to get through it or not with our plans. But my wife took a picture of something last Friday morning after a storm front blew through, and our two cities are about 5 hours, maybe 6 hours from where you are, but we're close enough to get the same weather patterns a lot. And we had clear skies in the morning for once and not a whole bunch of chemtrails. And she had a second light source right next to the sun. We don't freak out when stuff like this comes up because we have a plan, and more so than having a plan, we're in the unique position of talking to all the good people that really lead me to the only logical conclusion, and that is that I have faith because this plan was never what it's already become, and we've just started. So there's a higher power leading people here in the calling of us together and what we're going to be able to do. It's a little bit scary, but at the same time, God is sending us what we need and in abundance to build a town for a remnant of Christian people to make it through whatever it is that may come. Mm-hmm. So I hope that kind of wraps up getting started into the show, and we can kind of go from wherever you want to. I certainly love just having a conversation, but it's your show, so tell me what you need, Captain.
Well, I have a question. Though, did you say you watched The Edge, or did that play some role in this?
Well, yeah. I mean, just let's kind of add up what everybody's done in life. You get the benefit of talking to every big name in the business, and so a little piker like me, kind of getting an idea of what I need to do to sleep at night, knowing that I'm doing the best I can to protect my family because I prepared for many scenarios. Mm-hmm. When I watch you talk to people like last week, like Sheila Zielinski, but going back years ago, you've had many guests on with just a variety of topics that I don't like to go on someone else's show and talk about other shows, but the variety of guests that you have, and that's one of the things I like about what you do is you're not stuck in one genre of what's going on, and I think that helps people because I don't think it's one scenario. I think they're all interconnected in one way or another, and the reason why is the big question out there. But you kind of see what I mean about, through a variety of dozens of different guests that you've had, from mind control to the alien psyops to all kinds of stuff in between, that I think they're all interconnected. And yeah, you certainly played a role in me broadening my horizons into what it is that we're trying to prepare for sure. Mm-hmm.
Well, I agree with you there. I always felt that everybody has something to offer. You say that you've indicated that there's a divine. You feel like there's a divine leading or intervention or assistance on your part, but for others that would easily say, "Well, gee, I'm not creating I don't have nowhere to go. I don't have a micro town, but." And you indicated that I have a part. Well, I think everybody has a part. They don't even know it, and they assume that it's somebody else's job to do it. But I think there is an interconnectedness, and I think that's almost a design. It's a design on purpose that a person will sort of need somebody else. And so that requires you to listen to them. It requires you to interact with them. It really requires you to love them enough to listen to them. And one of the aspects of the show is simply to get people to listen to views and opinions that may be so far off of what they're at that if they just listen enough, they'll get some grains of truth. And everybody has some, and they bring something to the table, and hopefully they'll get inspired for their own sort of calling. And Jeff, as you know, this is there are questions coming in from our Fast Blast and from on our live chat, and we've got this one here right off the bat for you. It says, "Are you affiliated with John Moore, aka the Liberty Man?"
Yes, yeah, John helped us get started in the project, and we've been on his show several times, Thursday afternoons a lot of times. And with as busy as we're getting with construction and moving things in and out, I'm not sure if we're going to be a weekly feature anymore. But yeah, as much as John will have us, we'll be on with. So the answer is yes.
Okay, and there's a second question from MR2U2. Do you guys have a Facebook page?
Oh, well, it keeps getting unpublished because I set one up, My Ozark Homestead, at whatever the Facebook is. I'm guilty of not being very good at updating things right away. I've kind of got a line that forms, to the left, and the next person in front is the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. So, that's one of the things I'd like to talk about later if we get a chance, is the new board of directors that we put into place, because we have 8 very talented people that without their help, this plan would be so far beyond anything that I could handle, that it would be, dead on arrival at this point. But with their help, we're ready to move forward at lightning speed. So anyway, Facebook, yes, as soon as we get it republished, I just don't update it enough to keep the thing live. So.
All right. Well, let's get into some specifics on the community that's in development there. And I notice one of the key word that pops out, and that is coming in as questions too as well, about the sustainability or the self-sustainability. There have been news reports around the country, and I know the most recent one was in Florida, where somebody attempted to actually disconnect from the grid, and they were fined and threatened with jail because they in Florida, and they would not let them do that. Now you're talking about a whole town. I understand. Is that the laws and regulations allow that?
Well, where we are in Missouri, we actually have the blessing of the state, the local governments, and through a personal connection, we even have the new county sheriff that we're going to sit down and kind of go over what we're doing. I get questions all the time about the local authorities, the codes, things like that apply to what we're doing. I can't speak to what would happen if we would have a bunch of people in the dark, per se, as disconnecting from the electric grid. But I can tell you for a fact that the state of Missouri is very interested in what happens to the poop. And it's the Department of Natural Resources has the strictest codes on what happens with wastewater. And so the state of Missouri, once you reach so many occupants, you've got to have licensing for making sure that your water system is delivering clean water. But our electric and what we're doing, this is as succinctly as I can sum it up. There is a before the event and an after the event. And before the event, our members are allowed to buy in and build a house that's essentially a tiny house nation in a resort setting that's built around a sustainable farm. And so after the event, we're not going to have electricity to pull the water out of the ground that's coming in from the cables from the electric co-op that's feeding us now. And so we have alternative ways in play to do that, and the easiest of which is to backfeed that system with electricity generated from just your typical electrical generator. So, those people that are the scenario junkies like I am, what happens, a year from now, or at best 8 years from now, using military-grade fuel extenders when the gas gels and there's no more refineries and we're literally in no man's land for a decade. There are several ways other than your typical green energy alternative ways to produce electricity. And if we want to go into them, I can nerd out with just about anybody in this, and I love doing it when people get to specific questions. I just don't know if I want to bore the rest of your audience to death. So that's kind of your call, Daniel. Do you want me to go into some more specifics about electricity and the grid that's set up and that whole disconnecting from Florida, or?
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's finish out. Let's finish out on the poop question now.
Okay.
Where's it going?
Okay, so we have several different phases of build that we're doing. And for the larger homes, they're going to have septic, and it's just like a neighborhood where you've got a septic system in your backyard and you're not hooked up to a city sewer. So a lot of suburbs are set up this way if you're not set up in a decently large town that has a town grid set up for sewage. So septic tanks are the first thing with the larger builds. The smaller builds are going to be connected to what we call around here a lagoon system. And just about everybody in the Midwest that grew up and had a grade school that wasn't in a big city had a sewage lagoon somewhere way outside the grade school and down the hill a little bit with a fence around it and so forth. So the state of Missouri, once you have a property over a certain size, they have setbacks in how far this has to be from someone else's property, how far it has to be from your closest residence, and how high it has to be above the 25-year floodplain, and how big it has to be for how many people that are on this system and the secondary spillways and so forth. And for us, even though those are the toughest codes that are around for sewage treatment and disposal, for us, that doesn't work with what we're doing with a sustainable farm on a piece of land that's 200 acres big. Because if we poison the groundwater and we poison our food supply, meaning the animals that feed off of the pastures that are somewhat close to this, we're going to make everybody sick. And in the future, no matter what event happens, I believe that the most important thing that people can do is be able to harvest, to grow, and replenish their water and their food supply. Mm-hmm. And so with our plan, it is very, very high on the list that sanitation is a priority, because that's one thing that will make people sick in a hurry. And so, the codes are such, but we're building so far beyond the codes because we're trying to leave the environment in a better place than it is starting off with.
With the election of Donald Trump, do you see a delay in the scenario of the possibility of martial law or a societal breakdown that would really make the development of what you're doing more relevant? Is it more likely or less likely now?
Well, as far as the relevancy of what we're doing, if you take a look at the core idea, and for those of us that are aware of the things that the mainstream media is not going to tell us, our families think we're all insane. And I'm cool with that. I'm the underachiever in the family anyway, so this is just par for the course for me. But for everybody else's family, the application of what we do to the outside world, we just look like a bunch of hippies growing tomatoes in the woods, and that's just fine by me being a private homesteading club. But to the family members that want to justify what's happening with the money that you're putting into this project and why, if you don't want to go into the real reasons, you just tell them, this is a great idea. It's a resort that's coming from the ground up, being built around a sustainable farm. It's a terrific idea. And so whether martial law happens or 10 years down the road, we all say, oh my gosh, you remember 2015, 16, and 17? How crazy were we back then? If we're all in a place where our properties have now, gone up 50%, double in value. I mean, I don't even care if they go up at all. I don't plan on moving. This is my home. But for those that are using this as an investment vehicle, it's a beautiful thing. And, we'll get into someone that we've hooked up with through a connection that's actually, somewhat of your neighbor up there where you are. It's just a really interesting story in that we have a guy that's one of our board of directors now that helps people move 401k money into this as a true investment in a hard asset such as land and a home. And he does it without people incurring that 20 to 38 to 42% penalty that you get when you use your own retirement money on something that you want to buy. So, I mean, hopefully we'll have enough time to get into all this because we just got such incredible people connected with it. But the thing about martial law, I pray that it never happens. I have 4 boys. I have boys that range from, they're not teenagers anymore to, little kids that are 4 and 5 years old. And I pray that they get a happy life just like I did. And someday they get to, embark on their own journey. And as a father, my job isn't done until that happens. And they're able to get out in the world on their own and put their mark on it. So all right. I pray the martial law never happens, Donald Trump or not.
All right. Jeff, you ever see the movie by M. Night Shyamalan? I think it was called The Village.
Oh, sure.
Now
I waited the whole movie for the monster, and it was an airplane at the end, so that was kind of a letdown. But whatever.
Yeah, but the obviously for those that have not seen that movie, what it was some people that lived in cities and were tired of the crime. They went and evidently bought some parkland or some land and had it. Had a big fence around it, I guess multiple acres, and they put a town in there, and then they they raised kids in there that believed that they were in the 1800s, even though they really weren't. But in some sort of way, it sounds like you got a little bit of the village going on there, and there's nothing wrong with that, because they obviously they raised their own crops and they sewed their own clothes. I mean, they tried to go back, and in every scenario, in every kind of movie like that, there always seems to be, some Twilight Zone-ish ending that there eventually there was murder, and and then it started to break apart, and I think in the final end of it, I think actually may have came back together, and they may have moved on. So in some ways, do you feel like you could exist in that way, totally separate and apart from the known secular sort of developed world outside, or you're always going to need to depend on them?
Well, could we? Yes, absolutely. That's the way this plan is designed, without the grid that we're used to. But do we want to? And the answer to that is no. I have family and friends that are 180 degrees out of phase with what I believe, and that's fine. Everybody. I mean, I was raised. This is a free country, man. It doesn't cost anything to have your own opinion, and that's great with us. And without that outside world, our world becomes much, much harder. And I think that's the person that's alone whose plan is, I've got my MREs and my extra gas and that cool little tactical flashlight in the trunk. That's great. Where are you going to go? Who are you going to team up with? And when people really want to start breaking this down, I tell them, we lived in the suburbs. My wife and I are both professionals, and it is much more convenient to keep your eyes shut and just, get with the program. When we moved out to the farm, we almost sold it 3 different times. And if it wasn't for a very specific thing that happened each 3 of those times, we would have been right back in the suburbs raising kids with our blinders on and saying, this stuff's hard to put out of your mind, but, we have to if we're going to exist in the rest of the world like this. We've just found a way to coexist, and I hate to use that term because it's been hijacked by a bunch of, I don't get that bumper sticker, but that's just me. But we found a way to do what we're doing, do it with, everybody in range, from the lowest guy on the totem pole to the highest person on the totem pole, and we're all, existing in this for one common theme, and that is, if the event, whatever the event is, happens, that we're ready to help each other survive. And I think to a person, none of us are hoping that the lights get turned out, because we all like our things like our iPods and the internet. Right. And,
So you need that outside world really to stay intact, to gives you kind of a foot in 2 worlds. You got to kind of make sure that the outside world is intact so that you can continue your sustainability over there. Hey, let's get another question for you. This is from an old guy out of the live chat. He wants to know, are the defense plans in effect for your community? Is there a team? How are you handling security?
Well, let's kind of take a look at the overall in game and where we are now. And so, yes, there's definitely a plan. We can go over hundreds of different little intricate parts, but this is one of the important ones, because everybody wants to know, okay, so what's your closest city? And that's St. Louis, and we're about 90 minutes outside of St. Louis. So if the roving band of banditos even makes it down here, it's going to be pretty hard to infiltrate what we're doing just in geography. There's a lot of up and down with hills everywhere. I mean, I think many people kind of get the wrong idea about the mountains of the Ozarks that haven't been here. I know where you are in respect to where I am, and I know that we have a little more hills up and down than you do, but technically until you're over 1,000 feet, you're not a mountain. And most of the Ozarks is under 990 feet. There are several points that are, but not for very long, over 1,000 feet in elevation. But this geography is going to make it nearly impossible for the people to get down here. Now, if they do find where we've got our fields, where we've got the greenhouses that are going to get set up, where they've got our pastures, if they find that and they mean to cause trouble, there are several ways that our group is going to try to mitigate this before we get to the very worst of all possible scenarios. And I tread lightly with this because I want everyone to know that my first job in this is to ensure the safest way I can get every family into this and as efficiently as possible. And that means we start with people whose first reaction isn't, hey, get off my property or I'm going to shoot you in the face. That is absolutely the wrong thing to do. When you're in a group and it's grid down and every man for himself or every group for himself, our plan is that we're producing more than we need. So maybe we're short a veterinarian at this point, and somebody comes along and they're starving and they think they're going to, take something for ransom. Hey, we've got more than we need, man. What's your skill set? Oh, you're a veterinarian. Great. Listen, how about you help us out and just be part of what we're doing? And so it's easy when you've got more than you need. So let's say now we look at the scenario of we give away one more piece of bread and somebody's kid is going to starve to death that night and they don't want to move on. Do we have measures in place? We do. Do we need more guys on the team to fulfill these spots? We do. But do we have some of them here already? The answer to that also is yes. So, a lot of things to consider when you're going to try to keep a town put together, everybody in harmony and safe at the same time, because none of us know exactly what or when or how it's going to happen. But, we got to do our best, right?
Yeah. So what if somebody decides they're going to move to the Ozarks and they're going to move deep in the Ozarks by themselves? And they get their supplies and they're out there alone, virtually alone. Do they have actually a false sense of security? I mean, a person trying to do that on their own, doesn't survivability require that there be, others involved? Because when roving hordes of bandits go, one person is not going to be able to defend a single house unit deep in the Ozarks. Doesn't it require that by necessity there needs to be? And isn't that why even in early America they had forts? The settlers didn't live out there. They all wanted to move inside the fort because they knew every time they put that single house unit out in the middle of the mountains that they were just a sitting target and that nobody would ever hear from them again. I mean, it's like you're all alone and there's no stop. You don't got enough bullets and enough windows to shoot out of when they start coming at you. So doesn't it require a sort of a fort mentality rather than a single unit survivability attempt?
Yeah. So for the very few people that have the money to buy one and more of everything that they're going to need for the foreseeable rest of their life, I want those people, which you and I know there's not that many of them, but I want them to just imagine a scenario where they're out in the middle of the Ozarks. It's them. Let's say they even got their family, so they're not there quite alone.
Okay.
But they step on a rusty nail and they get tetanus. You're done. You're done. If you don't have a medical staff that you have access to, if you don't have it, forget about medications. If you at least don't have the herbal remedies to mitigate something like that, you're done. And once you're done, now your group, your family is worse off for it, because if you're on your own, you're doing everything. Forget about just guard duty, because you got to be up 24/7 or someone does for that. And if you can rotate through a crew, you're much better off. You're stronger for it as a group. If you're doing everything yourself, every time you're bent over to pick a tomato up, if someone's hiding in the woods with a long-range rifle and they mean to do you harm, good luck. So, you asked me, someone gets a house deep in the Ozarks, are they cutting themselves short? The value and the power of a group to take care of a little bit of this and a little bit of that makes someone's day a lot more livable than doing everything on your own. And in today's world, if you go back to the Native Americans before agriculture was brought to this country, they were called hunters and gatherers, right? I mean, from grade school. And, you can live off the land if you have enough land and it's enough productive land. I mean, if you're out in the middle of Kansas in a wheat field, you're going to die of malnourishment if all you've got is wheat. You just can't sustain yourself. But if you're in the middle of a forest and that forest is vibrant, and you got mushrooms and berries and nuts and you even have things like plantain weeds and growing in the grass and cattails in the ponds. You're not even going to have to hunt that much because you're able to pick your own, vegetation that's edible and survive off of that for quite a while. But then that same amount of forest now is sustaining 100 people. If you're all in the same boat, what are you going to do when you run out of enough berries and, enough nuts and everything? I mean, you really have to plan ahead for the whole scenario of you got to produce your own food. Without a grid, without the grocery stores, without barter, you got to produce your own food. And if you don't do that, eventually your whole existence is going to be getting something in your belly to quell the pain that dictates everything you do in life. And so anybody I talk to, whether they can get into what we're doing or they don't have a penny to their name, I want them to be in as safe of a place as possible. My gosh, a survival pack of germinating seeds, heirlooms or heritage type seeds are the kind that don't have the GMOs. They don't have the kill switch for creating more seeds once you grow the first fruits. That to get a survival pack of seeds like that at least and get growing something somewhere that you can protect, you're talking $25, $35. Even the best of them, you're not going to spend more than $125. So, guys, this has to be on the top of your list. Clean water and food got to be the first two things. Shelter is number 3.
Well, it sounds to me like that somebody who takes the, I got a house in the Ozarks with a storeroom full of dry goods needs to think that a little bit further through, because for one, that room's going to run out. And unless you're out there and got tillable soil somewhere in that forest. Look, I've been in the forest, and I can tell you there ain't that many berries sitting in the forest, and if there are, the bears and other animals are already getting them. So we'll be like last on the list because, as humans. So, and again, as I said, in the frontier days, if you had that house out there, in front of the fort, you're the one that's going to be the first gotten. It's not going to be the group attack, because they're going to go for the easy pickings of the singular residence, or like you say, maybe a small family type of unit. But that's interesting how you say about the nail, man. If you step on a nail, you're done. That's really, if you're going to have that mentality, you've got to think it through. So that's interesting there. Let me ask you something. We've got some more questions coming in, and this has to do with God's part of it. It says, do all in the residence that you have built, do they all have to believe in God? Is that a requirement?
Well, yes, but more so than that. I mean, I'm going to try to wrap this one up. Should be pretty quick. Someone that I met early on in this said, well, sure, believing in God's not enough. And I kind of looked at him and said, well, do you think the devil doesn't believe in God? And so it finally hit that, yeah, okay, so I believe in God. That's great, but probably so does Satan. And so for us on this first property, without a doubt, it is a Christian community. So I have no problem telling people, if you don't understand that the only way to the Father is through the Son, then you're not going to work with what we're doing on the first property. And, wait till we make this a commercial development, and then we'll have the same thing set up and anybody can buy into it. But this is a private club. It is a community for what will become, after the event, if it happens, hopefully a remnant of God's children working to rebuild. Anyone that's really kind of studied how that War of Armageddon goes, or anyone that's taken a look at the Georgia Guidestones, or anyone that's followed any number of things on the internet, understands that there is a number of how many people are going to occupy this earth someday after this event, and it's nowhere near as many people that there are now. So do we have the magic beans that we're going to be able to regrow society afterwards? I don't know. But we're going to try, and this is the best I can do to try to put together a recipe to give as many people that same peace of mind that we don't know, but, man, we're going to give it our best shot, and we're going to do it together. So, yes, you have to believe in God. You also have to accept that Jesus Christ is the only way to get to heaven. And so that's the answer to that question. Sorry for taking so long. Should have been shorter.
Not a problem. I think pretty important stuff there, Jeff. I think we can live with it. Indiana. Let's get back. Indiana history. There was a town, I believe it was in southern Indiana, called New Harmony. That town was developed early, as other towns were, to be a sort of a nirvana, a refuge, and similar to what you're describing, where believers would go and they tried to create the perfect society. And as most of those towns did, it's agreed, lust entered in, and it descended into chaos. What in your scenario prevents your group, or the group that moves there and lives there, occupies there from, maybe the neighbor's got his eye on his neighbor's wife. Maybe somebody needs a generator somebody else got, and just kind of mosey on over at night and grabs it. I mean, what's to prevent? And it's a good question, because human nature is such that we go along so far, and then all of a sudden our that kind of sinful part of it, the greed part, kind of goes through. How do you address that?
Well, I in a joke usually, it's what you're talking about is a socialist utopia. It doesn't exist, and it never will. The true spirit of mankind is competitive, and if you want to kind of boil this down in a nutshell, I'm a guy, I'm an ex-jock, and so it's pretty easy for me to understand things. Oh, and by the way, I used to also be a salesman, so I kind of understand when you put things in terms of women, because most of the guys that I've ever hung out with kind of understand it when you put it in something that they're very interested in. And so let's talk about this socialist utopia where the outcome is equal for everyone. The reason that it will never exist is because if you take a look at anyone, your left, your right, in front of you at the supermarket, sitting alongside of you at the highway, no two are exactly alike. Even if you have identical twins, most of the time they've got different personalities. So who's going to end up with the person that doesn't like to tell jokes? Who's going to end up with the person that talks too much? Who's going to end up with the person that's too tall? And so somebody is always going to do better than someone else. So the answer to the question of what is the best thing that I can do to prevent it, and that is to screen people, and we look for a certain amount of skills and, more importantly, the personality that allows people to problem solve, because reasonable people are going to understand when there's only one of this and one of that, and there's two of you and you both want the same thing, someone's going to get it and someone's not. And reasonable people compete. And there's nothing wrong with competing. I've done it my entire life. I imagine I'll still be doing it to the day I die. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And that's kind of the thing that I really feel sorry for this younger generation that gets a trophy for waking up in the morning. I mean, you got to learn how to lose to get back on your feet and try harder the next time. And sometimes it's just grit that gets somebody over that mountain and to the promised land. And with a special type of personality, we can do the best that we can, but there's nothing that's going to prevent it. And with what we're putting together, I can tell you, we are a group that's filled with nothing but chiefs. Even I can give you specific cases of the professional accomplishments and the personal accomplishments that people from every walk in the group that we've already put together would put them at the head of most tables of boards of directors. But if we have nothing but chiefs and no Indians, this doesn't work. And the beautiful thing about what we're doing is we all know this. And so even though it might be me out there that's talking about the idea that, that maybe I came up with, maybe it was divine intervention that all of this stuff unfolded this way, I don't kid around when I tell people I'm just happy that I'm being allowed to be along for the ride at this point. I'm not kidding. I'm horrible at administrative work. And so when I get that secretary that tells me you got 15 minutes and then you're done, we got to do this other thing, believe me, if she's the one that can keep the trains running on time with a project like this, I'm more than happy to work for her. And that's the kind of spirit that this entire program is, that we're filled up with doctors and scientists and tradesmen and people that have invested their entire life in this. And I've just got such terrific people to already be called to this that I don't think there's any way that something like this falls apart in a scenario that you talked about where people get too greedy or too competitive. I think everybody is looking at being in a group of like-minded people and giving ourselves the best chance of survival. And until we get to that event where we have to put all of that to the ultimate test, we're going to build a little community where we can be comfortable, where we don't have to wash our clothes on the old washboard and schleps, water up from the spring in 5-gallon buckets and walk a half mile each way with our arms falling off by the time we get there. We're going to live comfortably, just like we live today. iPads, air conditioning, it's available to us. And, throughout whatever we did, we've earned the right to have these things. And so why not enjoy ourselves for a little bit? I mean, we're not a bunch of heathens out here partying, waiting for the end.
Well, let me ask you. Well, Jeff, let me ask you.
Go ahead. Sure.
Do you guys have? Is it a satellite internet or cable internet out there?
We could have both. Nobody has satellite. We've got DSL. I mean, we are in the sticks, and so it's not fiber optic.
You can't be too far in the sticks if you got DSL, man.
Yeah, well, the old copper telephone line. But we've got what used to be high speed internet. Yeah. We're hooked up to the modern world. I mean,
all right. Well, let's get to a couple quick questions.
Okay, sure.
Are you retired?
Me? No. This is a full-time job for me.
All right. Question from Kentucky girl. Do you have a remedy for tetanus should somebody have it? I mean, do you have a book of remedies?
Well, sure. My wife is a nurse practitioner in a family practice. She runs a clinic here in the closest town that we're to.
Okay.
And so for the past 14 years, she's been quote unquote the town doctor. Again, a nurse practitioner, not an actual physician.
Okay.
But she prescribes everything, and she only collaborates with her physician one day a week.
Make sure the state don't come in and try to get you for haven't been an MD without a license. Who knows, man? All right, here another question. I like that the way you got to prevent the jackbooted thugs from coming in. All right, here's a question. Are there requirements of certain skill sets in order to join? And you've listed a bunch that people seem to have. So would you reject somebody who wants to move there if, say, well, gee, I really don't know how to do nothing except talk on my cell phone, and text people. I mean, would you take a person like that? Or would you say, dude, you got to know how to do something?
Yeah, we've talked about it before. In the beginning of this project, the person that said, you know what, I can't do anything, but I got a lot of money to help you get started.
Okay, I like that guy.
I would say, hey, that's why God sent you here. We don't have the finances to build this right now, and you do.
Okay.
If you understand that that's your part in this, that you're doing all the heavy lifting with the checkbook.
There you go.
Then I'll surround you with the people that can make your life very comfortable. But we've gone beyond that at this point to where yes.
Okay, well let me tell you something, Jeff. I said earlier to the folks, and most of the long-term viewers know, maybe that one of the things I do is I keep bees. So therefore, I get honey, and I got chickens, so I get eggs. So I got a garden, a weedless garden. I got berry trees and fruit trees. I'm ready to live off the grid right now. But one thing about the beehive is one of the bees in there, one part of them are called drones. Mm-hmm. These drone bees do nothing but have a good time with the queen, and then the rest of the time they sponge off the bee community. If you had somebody in that community that began to maybe say not do their guard duty or not clean the poop out, or some way that most people know that, hey, he's always borrowing stuff, never wanting to add. Is there a method to say, we've evaluated your presence here and you're no longer needed? I mean, that's what the bees do. In wintertime, they'll take those drones and kick their little bee butts right on out. So I'm just wondering, do you guys have a plan like that?
Well, sure. In good times, there's no reason that if somebody's fully invested, that part of why they're here is not, working the gardens or something. If they're fully invested in the good times, there's no reason that conversation would ever come up. Grid down and someone's not pulling their weight, you bet there's going to be a lot of people that are going to say, hey, wait a second, brother. Somebody was supposed to pick these beans today, and that's because they weren't picked yesterday or the day before, and now these beans are rotting on the vine, and that's your job. So explain to me why they're not getting picked and why we can't get you off your off your rear end here and pitch in like everybody else, because you certainly are enjoying the milk from the cow that I got you this morning.
So what do you do? Cut their internet off for a week?
This is in grid down, so there ain't going to be any internet in grid down. I mean, if we're in that scenario, there's not going to be any electricity, no air conditioning, and so this is the only time when this has to be in play, that the community has to work together. And in that scenario, it's just like you can think of if you and 6 of your buddies decide to make it on your own, what are you going to do with buddy number 6 that thinks that he's just going to stand around and tell you to pick the beans, you to milk the cow, the other guy to sit there and fan him off with a big old fan so he can sit around on his butt? You've got to find a way to match somebody's skill set with their level of desire, and that might be moving them to a different task.
Okay.
But if you want a vibrant community in a grid down situation, take a look at the pioneer days before they had any of this stuff, because that's what we're talking about.
Well, Jeff, listen, we're at the top of the hour. We take a 5-minute break here. Go ahead and talk about your website and the Ozark Project for Survival. Go ahead.
Sure, yeah. You can reach us at myozarkhomestead.com. If you want to give us a call, that number is 844-MyOzark. Again, it's myozarkhomestead.com.
All right, well, we're going to tone you down and turn your volume down. You'll still be on the line. We'll bring you back in 5 minutes.
All right.
All right, everybody, you're watching and or listening to the Edge television broadcast. Tonight, all the way from the Missouri Ozarks, we have Jeff Harness talking about the Ozark Project for Survival. Hopefully, y'all learning some tips to survive in your own area. Maybe you want to move down there as well. Sounds like it might be a calling. All right, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll be right back. And welcome back to the Edge television broadcast. If you missed any of the exciting first hour, it will begin to replay in our main player on the Edge's website there. Additionally, we'll put up the entire interview in high definition captured video on our YouTube channel. We'll put it in our TuneIn Radio playlist, which plays our programming 24 hours a day across any device, any platform. And of course, we'll podcast it as well. Now, let's go back to our newsmaker line and welcome back Jeff Harness. Jeff, welcome back.
Hey, welcome back. Thanks for having me, Daniel.
Well, there's been a time or two I want to run to the hills, but I decided I'm just going to stay in the city area and just get enough guns and ammo to take on the hordes of jackbooted thugs coming my way. But when it comes to guns and such, is there any sort of you have like a gun storeroom, or does everyone expected to keep their own guns? What's the whole military part of that? The protection part.
You really have to break in what we're doing. You have to break it down into two different scenarios. One is life is great, nothing's changed, and the other is after the event in the bunker. All right. So the more restrictive would be after the event in the bunker that we're building. All right. The plan is that we're going to have a rotating sergeant at arms or a quartermaster, if you will, that's going to be able to take inventory and have these things to where it's like on an airplane where the sky marshals are armed up, but the rest of the passengers aren't. Mm-hmm. And even though we trust everybody in the bunker, the thing is, at the price point that we're doing it, you're not getting some luxurious bunker that someone may not, in a long situation, start to kind of flip out. I mean, it's none of us really know, unless you've been on a submarine, what it's like to close the hatch and be in close quarters for that long. So if this event happens, that to keep everyone safe, we're going to have a person that's in charge of keeping the armory inventoried and locked up. And hopefully we've come up with a safe enough plan that we're not going to need to defend ourselves from outside or within once we're in the bunker. I mean, our design itself is going to keep this thing pretty hidden. And so unless you're really using military grade stuff or you happen to know exactly where it is, which, there aren't going to be very many people that do other than the ones that are invested in it, that it's going to be kind of hard to just stumble across it. I mean, it's nearly impossible. But as long as everything's great and fine and dandy, we encourage every one of our members to stock up on whatever they want to make them feel safe. And we take care of that in the screening process. I mean, the one thing medically that we're just not going to accept are people that are prone to psychotic episodes. And,
wow.
There are many things that we can work with, but, someone just losing their marbles at the snap of
okay.
What?
You just in my mind, all of a sudden I saw a movie, and it's Armageddon with Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
At one point, a guy, the crazy guy with the bad teeth, he's sitting on a nuke, and he starts shooting because he's gone space crazy, man. So he just starts shooting everywhere. So they finally had to knock him off the missile thing that he was on. So yeah, you got to watch out for psychotics there. But speaking of that, one of the questions came in. It says, what are the background checks that, all the terms these days in the whole election cycle is vetting, or even for immigrants coming over to the United States? How are we going to vet them? Well, how are you guys planning to vet? Do you have a team that does that for each new applicant or whatever?
Yeah, we have a company that we've just hooked up with that handles the background checks for criminal backgrounds nationwide and internationally. Mm-hmm. So if someone's got a criminal history, we're going to see it. I mean, we don't run someone's credit. I'm not worried about whether someone's got, a FICA score of anything or not. But we are worried about taking a look at your history of crimes against other people and other people's property. And someone that shows a pattern that they can't work well with others, we're just not going to accept them. But, someone that when they were a kid, they made a couple of dumb decisions and it's something that we can live with. I don't have a problem with looking at things on a case-by-case basis because we're all individuals, so this isn't a cookie-cutter answer. But if someone shows a pattern of behavior that looks like it's going to be detrimental to the safety of the group at large, I don't care how much money they've got. I don't care how much anything they are. They're not going to be a part of this group. And so the personal interview is something that takes a very long time from start to finish. We're usually 8 hours plus with anyone that's a member here. So we get to know people very well because above everything else, we're going to be neighbors. So I want to make sure that the people I'm living next to are people that I don't mind seeing having coffee in the morning.
I thought of another movie. I guess I've seen a lot of movies. One of them's called the Outlaw Josie Wales,
love it.
And in that in that movie, there's a scene where they're all in this house, and he says, "Okay, well, Granny, you go by the fireplace, and if somebody gets a bullet wound, slap hot iron on them, and
slap lead to it,
hot lead, and then you got but you got somebody at every window. But if a person is say holed up in the deep Ozark Mountains, they can't be at every they can't be at every window because eventually they were coming through the roof. You've got to have enough people around to protect yourself, and that's sort of like what you're describing your community as. Instead of that single unit, you have these houses around so that whichever direction that, say, the roving hordes would come, there would be somebody in that area to fend them off. So it sounds like a community is definitely a better way. It definitely increases the survivability of that. And then let's get to another question. It says, and let's go back just a little bit. We were talking about the vetting situation. How do you know that, like in Ruby Ridge and other places, that a government informant's not in there and has already joined your group and is just reporting back to the thugs at DHS or somewhere? Homeland Security.
I would say great. He's going to tell the thugs at the lettered agencies that we are not a threat to anything. I mean, I don't know how else to convey to people that the last thing that we want to do is be a threat to anyone. If anything, we just want to be left alone. And so, yes, we do have someone that's very closely connected with the group that's kind of given us a lot of pretty good advice about if there is a list, wink, wink, hint, hint, that the best thing to do is to be the very last group on it, and that is to demonstrate that you are not a threat to anyone. And so, the typical age of our member is such that you're not going to get much of a fight if you come and you want to steal somebody's tomatoes a day or two. But, do we have scenarios for these kind of things? You bet. But germane to your question, what if we've been infiltrated already? Honestly, Daniel, I'm not I'm not Edward Snowden, so can I check someone's background just because they leave their cell phone sitting on the desk? No. And so, yeah, I'm one of these pragmatic guys that says, well, sure, if they really wanted to get a double agent down here and to see what we're doing, the report would read, nothing to see here, move along. I mean, literally, we're just building a community of like-minded people that want to be left alone to, grow tomatoes and milk the cows.
Well, I would say on your behalf, it seems that when it comes to groups, that there are known terrorist training camps in America, and they don't bother them any. So before they ever get to you guys growing some maters down there by the river, hopefully they're going to go over there where you got jihad flags going around, and you got guys running with 50 cows shooting all the time. Yeah. Stolen from U.S. armories and stuff. They need to go over there first. I think we already asked this question, but maybe we can clarify just a little bit. Philip from Georgia says, what's to keep villagers from turning on each other? But I think you sort of addressed that. Is there going to be like a sheriff, a main guy?
Well, there has to be some kind of chain of command, even if, all anarchy has broke out in the rest of the country, we have a self-governance council that we're putting together. And it's a pretty simple 7-man team or 7-woman team. It's comprised of obviously 7 members.
Mm-hmm.
And, just like when the Supreme Court was set up, the idea was that there will always be at least an odd vote. Mm-hmm. Not everything's unanimous. And so when it comes to grievances, we look at the little things first. Like when we get together, it's going to be more or less like the loosest policed homeowners association. There's not going to be any rules that to be in here if your grass isn't exactly 4 inches tall, you're going to get fined. I mean, that stuff is just so ridiculous. This is not America.
Wait a minute. But by the way, Jeff, I've got I grabbed several pictures from your website. I'm going to get out.
Oh, great.
I'm going to get out of the picture myself right now so people can see this. There's a beautiful kind of a grassy knoll with a little house or cabin there, and then some deciduous trees maybe starting to turn. Mm-hmm. But that little house there, that doesn't really look like a dream house there. Did I? It looks like an outhouse, man. Was that the kind of residence that I can look forward to moving down there?
Well, if you want something that primitive, a little later on in the project, yes. Right now, if you take a look at our website, I can tell you that the pictures that are up there, our director of marketing, his name is Ross Powell. He also runs the website survival401k.com. This man is a brilliant financial planner, and if anybody has means and wants to get into this and do it tax-free and without the penalties and in a hurry, Survival 401k is your place to go. But Ross took a lot of cool little pictures off of the internet. So you're obviously looking at the new version of the website. The old one was the one that had a lot of pictures of where we come from. And for all your listeners, Daniel, you were on me in plenty of time for me to submit you a folder of pictures from the website. So, if you want me to, I can get on my email right now and send some of those. It's just been so overwhelming that I haven't had a moment to stop and do anything but work on stuff for the members that we've got. Yeah. God has just been keeping us way too busy to do the right things that we need for guys like you.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Okay, let's move into that a little bit. You say that there seems to be some providence involved with this whole thing, a leading supernatural, perhaps. What would be an example of that?
Okay, well, I'll start off with the way this thing almost ended 48 hours before it began. So in 2014, I really kind of left the business that I was in, and I was making a decent living. And so for 2 years, my family had to put up with me giving away by not doing what I normally would do about 92% of my income. So when you've got 2 decent income earners and you're spending that money, that's a pretty big hit to take. And so in my house, I'm not the king. I ask my wife when I can run the show every once in a while. She even lets me. But, we got to the point where I was spending so much time trying to put the last piece of the puzzle together that we had a big fight at my house. Uh-oh. And I almost walked out the front door, and I knew I needed to fix this with my wife before this project could continue. And so I sat down with her, and about 2 hours into fixing this, I said, honey, I just know, I don't know how, I just know we're so close that if you can reach down and just hang on to something for 48 hours, I can make this happen. And she said, you got 2 days. I kissed her. I went to work that night. She didn't see me until, after work the next day. It was on just a razor thin margin that by a prayer, somebody answered that prayer and said, okay, well, I trust you. Let's do a webcast tonight. And that was the start of this, but not quite, because that next day was Friday morning. We didn't put the interview in the can until almost midnight. He had to edit it, and it was 3 hours and 15 minutes of conversation. He crunched it down to 2 hours and 15 minutes, got it on the internet at 3-something in the morning. By 4 o'clock, whatever it was, we figured out, and people were sending me emails wanting to send money in deposit to make sure they insured a place here. And I didn't know this because I was so dead tired from working 2 days straight. I get in the office, the phone is blowing up, I pick it up. It's a guy from Florida, and not only is it the first guy that I talked to in person that started talking real money from the beginning, but Rich Jones is now our director of sales, and he's one of these special individuals that's involved in the project that without him we would not be where we are today. Mm-hmm. And he'll tell you, because he loves telling that story, that I was literally down to about our last 6 hours when Rich and I talked. And I took my wife to lunch, or at least I went over to her office for lunch that day, and I said, honey, I don't know what happened here, but you need to see the emails. You need to take a look at my phone. Whatever this is now real. And, you know, she's kind of been on that roller coaster with this before, that, yeah, well, let's see. Mm-hmm. And and the money just started to come. And we needed that because financially I had taken my family as far as I could take them financially in this on our own, in that at that point, if it wasn't going to work, it was just going to be us. And that's one of about 150 little miracles that had to happen for this thing to fall into place. And so, you know, I could take up the rest of the show with it, but I know you got everybody wanting to ask other questions, so I'll definitely respect that. But I love telling that story. All
right. Let's go to this question here from guest 238. You mentioned grid down, but what about nuke down? What's the scenario there?
Well, you know, I'm with everybody that's in this, to a fault. I try to be more honest than anybody that you're going to run into. Nuclear fallout, this is one of the deadliest things that could happen to the planet. And so, first strike, we're in an area, and again, I got half-hour answers to all this stuff, Daniel. First strike, second strike, third strike. We're in an area that a relative of mine is a son of a full bird colonel in the Air Force that was the only 06 during the Cold War when he was in charge of it that knew where all 18,000 warheads were. His game was to keep his Russian counterpart guessing at which missile silos had missiles in them and which ones didn't. And he grew up on a farm about 20 miles away from here, knowing that Alabama wasn't safe, but the safest place in the country was the Missouri Ozarks. And so finding that out, and with this relative becoming a terrific engineer that's actually involved in this project in a very special way that everybody hopefully will never have to understand.
Let me ask you a general question. Yep. I'm being from the Midwest here, though I obviously am a cowboy, so no. But what's the difference between the Arkansas Ozarks and the Missouri Ozarks? Is it the same thing?
No, I mean they're all one geographic region that just has a state border in between the two. But the stuff that people need to understand that's different between the two, look at the big quakes in 13, 14. Everybody knows that the Liberty Bell was rung by one of these big quakes off the New Madrid. But if you take a look at what happened outside of Jonesboro, Arkansas during that quake, literally the soil liquefied and the old town sunk in it just like quicksand. And up in the Missouri part of the Ozarks, over to the west of the Mississippi River, there was hardly any effects that were felt. And the reason being is not only is the strata underneath the Missouri Ozarks some of the oldest and deepest rock on Earth, really only second to Jerusalem, that there is a wall of granite that runs from south of St. Louis all the way down into the Missouri Boot Heel. And this is kind of like a natural shock absorber. So if you can imagine plunking a stone in a lake and watching that wave, that ripple effect go from the stone out in all directions, and then you put a piece of granite right there in the middle of the water, what happens to that wave rocking and rolling everything else when it gets to the granite? So there is definitely a big difference between the Missouri and Arkansas Ozarks.
Okay. Another question for you is, and this goes back to where we're discussing the proclivities or the religious beliefs of those that join the micro community there. It says, would you force specific Christian beliefs on other Christians? As you know, I
would never force anything on anybody, Daniel. I was raised by a man that taught me that I was blessed with a few things physically that other people never would, and that I was never to take advantage of that. So, I'm sorry for cutting you off, but I would never force anybody to do anything. That's not what this is about.
So, all right. So we would, because in this in the sort of the outside world, I guess I would say, you got your pre-trib people, your mid-trib, and your rapture people, and your not rapture people, and they don't get along very well. So I didn't know, what, if there's a situation there. I think that may be in what they refer to.
Maybe I'm naive. I mean, I'm open about what I believe. I've got kids. I've got to believe that rapture is pre-tribulation. That's just me. That gives me hope. Now, if I have to live through all the bowls of wrath and go through that hell on earth, I'll do everything I can to protect my family, to make sure that they're with me on the other side of this.
Okay. And earlier, Jeff, you were talking about having a piece of bread and say giving it to your kids for some reason. When you're in that situation, your civilization down type mode. But what if your community then, rather than a roving horde of thugs, which is obviously will come from the inner cities, and man, St. Louis has got to be one of those towns. Hopefully, you're not even close to that mess, especially Ferguson over there. But what if a group of tired, hungry, just regular family folk with their kids crying babies, packing diapers, comes at your community and says, "Man, we heard you got some food. How much you going to share? What's the plan?"
Well, just like anything biblically, everybody that works eats. And so, you can come in starving. And in this point, hopefully we're talking years from now, hopefully our storehouses will be filled. I mean, if we're doing things the right way, we should have more than we'll ever need and be able to replenish it. And so we're in a place where not even a half a mile from one of my property lines, I'm sitting up against 9,700 acres of protected conservation land and national forest. And so if you're talking about what do we do with the family of 10, grace isn't just you give them a meal and you send them on their way. Grace is I give them the meal, they're still going to starve. They need a better way. And so we would certainly want to bring this person in. If he had no skills, we want to teach him. I don't know, Daniel, that this has not happened yet, but my answer to it is everybody has a value in this. And, believing biblically that the hand of protection by God is going to be,
with the city,
over us.
The city the size of St. Louis, though. Let's suppose you have, like in zombie apocalypse, you see just massive amount of people walking down the highway, and once word gets out, there's food down at the Ozark sanctuary. They're going to be coming from all over. Surely it's going to tax your ability to replenish what you have at some point.
Oh, well, let's be real about it. The city of St. Louis itself is like 345,000, 400,000 people. All of those people move in one direction or another, and it's going to be like a horde of locusts. So if you're telling me that if you take just down Interstate 44, if you're going to say 500,000 people are going to walk in a wave through the end of Franklin County, I hate to bring this up, but take a look at the history of a little town called Sullivan, Missouri. And if you think there aren't a whole bunch of good old boy rednecks down there that are going to have a problem with that, you should think again. But it's like, thank goodness for that, because first of all, the logistics in moving that many people, even if they're walking in unison, it ain't going to happen. They're not going to make it 90 miles without food, without shelter. Just not going to have. They're not going to be that physically able to do it. But let's say 10,000 of them were able to get there. They're not going to be able to find us. If they can find us, it's only going to be because you've got a couple of guys that broke away from the crowd, and we're not talking 10,000. We're talking about 10 guys at a time. Now, a gang of 10,000, you're talking about bigger than, an army division. If there's any kind of civilization left, they're not going to let that gang of banditos that far, out of the nest, so to speak. But the ones that possibly could, we have countermeasures set in place, but to talk about something like that on air, I'd rather keep this light, Daniel. Yeah. It's not a nice situation that I'd like to discuss.
No, it's really not. Here's keeping it light. Doug White wants to know, were you going to play for the St. Louis Cardinals?
No, not the Cardinals. There was the St. Louis Rams moved to town in '95, and so my little career pretty much started to end at that point. I wasn't good enough, but but I was kept throughout the extra expansion tryout that they had. And then that summer, I kind of went to a couple different tryouts. I even tried out with a Canadian team in North Carolina at one of the universities there. And my agent got me a no-cut contract with the then St. Louis Stampede. And I was so offended by not being good enough to be in the NFL that there was no way in the world I was going to play Arena League. And sure enough, a couple years later, here comes Kurt Warner out of a grocery store in Iowa. So, Homer Simpson moment, dough. But if I would have, I probably wouldn't have got to this. And I feel like this is my calling in life. So I'm very satisfied with what I'm doing now.
Has anyone down there seen any drones fly over?
Last year, we saw a conservation department drone dropping little green glowing things in the woods. And that was interesting because, when you're kind of aware of things and it's the first time you see something like that at nighttime, it's a little interesting. But, they're just looking for deer poachers, the day or two before deer season started. And that just happened to be the first time that we saw something like that. But, yeah, the conservation department actually goes out and looks for hunters hunting out of season.
I never heard of dropping green things out there. So, sure there wasn't
those little glow stick looking things.
Really? You sure there wasn't more like some kind of extra dimensional?
I almost wish it was because it was really boring. I got out a 12-gauge shotgun, loaded it up with shells, took my hunting dog with me, and walked across the street for about an hour until I came across it, and I said, "Oh boy, what a letdown that was."
Jeff, what's the projected capacity of the microtown?
Well, with this particular one, we own 200 acres. We're the only ones that occupy 638 continuously. I got 118 that 6 families of hunters do. So we're going to limit the occupancy to about 200 to 215 people, but we've already got big properties lined up to move this over to next. So literally we have thousands of acres in play. As soon as we get close to filling this one up, we're going to expand quite a bit more and into a couple other interesting arenas that I just can't talk about yet before we go public with them.
Interesting. Sounds like it's a growing type of situation. Any of those that have made movements toward this microtown, has any of them relayed to you that they felt God calling them there, or is it just a practical matter? They want to disconnect from their conventional lives out in the mainland.
No, this is something where, Daniel, you will find that you'll have people that will probably send you an email and they'll say, "Man, I just caught your show tonight. I'm so glad that I found out how to get a hold of these guys." That maybe it'll be a listener that hasn't tuned into you in a year, and something told them to watch the show tonight.
Okay.
And they're just amazing stories. But I got to tell you one about a call that I almost didn't make this week. And it ended up being one of the most fantastic things. Remember I texted you that there was someone from a space agency that's now connected with the project?
Yep.
Yeah. I can't tell you his name. He's so high up that, you could take a look at this guy on the internet. But the thing is his wife and him were praying for something like this to be available for about 3.5 years. And we're the first ones that put this type of a group together. And we got to chatting a little bit, and it turns out he works on the really fun end of the rockets, and he answers to a pretty high set of bosses. And so I had to ask him if they ever let him play on the supercomputers, if he and I really were like-minded, and he gave me a very interesting answer in that they don't let him do personal projects there, but he's checked out the history of things. And if it weren't for verifying the mathematics that him and his buddies across the country and the different agencies have worked out, that this would have ended there for him. But he took a very long look at a lot of archaeology and world events and world history, and it matched up with everything mathematically. And the interesting thing, Daniel, is that his timeline and my timeline are very similar, and now is the year to do it.
So you're saying that he looked on a supercomputer?
No. Just the opposite. The agency won't let him do personal projects on a supercomputer.
Right.
So he had to teach himself archaeology. I mean, this man is a genius. And, if we have time off air to talk about his lineage in this, it might make an interesting little side topic one day. But because he didn't have access to the supercomputers for personal projects,
okay,
he had to go back through world history and modern archaeology And sure enough, there's something that fits this timeline that comes around every few thousand years in the same interval as the Bible. And unfortunately, we're in that interval now. And this is someone that gets paid a lot of money to work very high up in one of the space agencies that I just can't mention.
Okay, so let me get this straight and clarify my thinking. Are you saying that one of the sort of God-breathed themes to this whole thing is there's an event coming, and this is some year or time period or season that your microtown needs to be developed right now?
Sure, and yes, the answer is yes. But I want to be very clear, because this isn't, Katie, bar the door, it's time to sell everything and go. Mm-hmm. This is a very pragmatic and scientific approach, and verified by someone that has all of the knowledge to do it. And for every reason, I will not betray his confidentiality in this. Right. He's been such a gift from God in telling us in a very calm way that, number one, yes, it is going to happen. Number two, it's going to happen soon enough that now's the time that you and I meet. And number three, it's survivable. So I want everybody to understand this is survivable. And the reason that it's so crazy and a regular person can't just get a little $100 telescope and take a look out there is because, number one, it's a different kind of object than we've had. And, we're not going to go into the other things that he told me, but the math in this thing is so crazy, because when you're talking about multiple objects that have gravity, when they disturb the inner part of the solar system, and now you really need to understand what day are we looking at, where is it coming, and so forth. You're talking about something that's got a slingshot upon slingshots upon slingshots, and every time it picks up something else of mass, like a big comet, a big asteroid that's out there, it either helps it speed up or slow it down or changes its trajectory a little bit one way or another. Mm-hmm. And he and I both agree, the thing is, don't sell out and just go right now. Mm-hmm. Be realistic about it, and we've got time to do it. But humans have been around since at least the Sumerian civilization, and before it, if you go back into different Indian, writings and glyphs and all this stuff. So mankind will survive. Unless this thing is on a collision course, mankind will survive, and we're probably talking about, hopefully, best case scenario, it's only close enough that it causes crazy weather. I mean, you and I are both in the Midwest.
Jeff, let's put it out there. Are you talking about Planet X?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So then, looking into the future, this microtown is in such a place and a time and development to survive that.
Well, we certainly hope. With the involvement of this particular individual, it confirms that we have hope. And will we need to use the bunker? His scenario is, best case, we got really bad storms. We're not going to see a pole shift, all this earth tilt, the ocean's coming out of their basins. Worst case scenario, Revelations talks about it. The third secret of Fatima talks about it. All the governments in the world know it. I'm starting to say too much, so let's just kind of sum it up with saying we are looking at that mid-range scenario where it's not lights out on humanity, but we are able to get through this thing. It's just going to change life as we know it on the other side, and we better be prepared to do a lot more heavy lifting to get our daily bread after it than we are before the event. And together, that becomes a reality, where separately and in different parts of the world, it's going to be really tough. But
is there any biblical text that suggest that in order to survive, you need to be in sort of a communal or small town type situation? Is there any stories that show people gathering to survive an event?
Yeah, they talk about the remnant.
Okay,
but
the remnant, there has to be more of the remnant than can possibly fit into the micro town.
Oh, no, we're not going to be the only ones. People are going to survive all over the place.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't want people to think I'm so nut that they think you have to be right here or you're not going to survive. Listen, I'm not Noah. There's just, I can't. Okay,
so us out. So if we're not in your town, and a lot of us out here, I mean, I'm definitely part of the remnant. I know I'm part of the remnant. So I can look, man. I feel like I got so much coverage from God that I can walk through a nuke radiation blast. But are you saying then there is hope for others who cannot make it to your town that they may be part of the remnant? But Jeff, how does one in the general public know they are part of the remnant, or even the people coming to your place? How do they know they're the remnant?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, that's a question of everyone's faith, and I'm glad you said it the way you said it, Daniel. If I were someone that knew that they were close to you, and I had a question about my faith through all this, I would try to set up a lunch. I mean, I don't know what it would take to get you out and to meet you out in the street and calm somebody down. But, I would think if they offered you a lunch at your favorite restaurant, you might have a couple of minutes. I would want to hook up with a guy like you if I were outside of the town that you're outside of and I didn't have a plan. Mm-hmm. You have to be right with God. And once you walk with God, what's the old scripture that if God is for me, who can stand against me? Right. If you don't have that strength in your faith, then you need to get with people that are going to get you to there. Because when it's your time, brother, you better just let him get all up in there and do his business with you. Because if you're going to make it to the kingdom one day, it's all about doing his will on earth. And for me, I didn't wake up and hear the voice one night. It was I've been working on this plan because I was freaked out about how to keep my family safe. Mm-hmm. And it took me 2 years to develop something that other people were interested in getting involved in. Mm-hmm. At that point, I lost all control of it. The moment that I had people coming in and wanting to invest in this thing and make it bigger than I ever thought was the moment that I realized that my prayers not only were answered, but the Bible was just proven right in the whole thing about fill my storehouses and test me if I don't overflow yours, that I have never prayed for this many blessings in this, and I cannot square it with anything rationally that, I'm just such a great businessman that I put together, Donald Trump-like deals all the time. Mm-hmm. This is the only time in my life I've ever had something happen this homogeneously and naturally that I don't know, Daniel. I just feel so blessed. I'm overwhelmed and I'm humbled with it that I don't want to be out there saying this is my plan, I'm the smallest part of this plan at this point. For me to get up here and talk, I'm not doing anywhere near as much work as the guys that are swinging a hammer and carrying, stacks of lumber and moving tons of earth around. I'm the smallest part in this at this point. But if that's my part in this show, I'm happy to be part of it at this point. But I do mean that. If you have your faith in God as strong as you just told me, and you aren't able to get into a community here, I would want to be hooking up with you there. And I think that's what it's all about.
Has anybody expressed to you that, and you said you didn't really have dreams, but has anybody else said that they had dreams, maybe, and that they were personally directed in your direction?
Tons of people. As a matter of fact, this week we've had a lot of people that we're really close to crossing the goal line with that have had questions. And I know you've talked to old military guys, and they got this saying that you're over the target when you receive the flak. I have a tough time talking in name about the dark side of this. I will praise God, Jesus all day long. I'm not one of these guys that gets up and makes you feel little because you don't know scriptures. I don't know scriptures. I love the stories, so I try to paraphrase as much as I can, but I try to live better and more with God every day. But I don't even speak the other one's name as much as I can stay away from it. But we have definitely seen that there have been a lot of things, family, things on the news, and all kinds of disinformation out there that instead of saying, this is just people getting cold feet, no, this is the other side making sure that the good people don't get together in this. And I just know it works out in the end, because out of about 12 people that have gotten cold feet in one way or another, it's not about the money for me. I have to have it paid for to build it. But if it's not right for you, I'm not selling timeshares. I want the right people involved with this. It has to be the right decision for them. I got a couple of plans later on after this first property that will help people that are literally indigent get to a safer place and be part of a land trust. But anyway, that's another project for another show possibly. But what we're doing right now, I can tell you I've had so many people say that they fell ass backwards, sorry about that, into seeing a program about this, that there's no way in the world it was just a coincidence. And I accept everybody's journey to get here, and I wish that you could be on these interviews with the people that are calling from all over the country, and one of them even from outside the country in Sweden. I mean, we get a lot of calls from Canada, but if you could hear these people and you could hear these stories of how they came to us, I'll tell you just one real quick then, and I'll sum it up for you.
All right.
Really early on, I was kidding around with the first person. She's a sweet gal from South Carolina. We, if nothing else, we're lifelong friends, but we're neighbors now in this.
Oh, okay.
She's the first person that actually cleared money that we started building with member investment with this gal. And her first phone call was like a lot of them up to that point, really kind of all over the map. I could hear the fear or, whatever it was in her voice. And I just knew that this was supposed to be. And I told her so at the beginning of the phone call. And the nervousness kind of went away. And I said, now, I'm going to tell you something. I know we need a diesel mechanic. I need someone that can fix the tractor and the excavator if things get bad. And if God really wants to throw this over the top for me, the next person I talk to is going to be a diesel mechanic. Well, it wasn't. The next person I talked to was a construction guy from Texas. But the next morning, I wasn't going to pick up the phone the second day in being public with this because it was just blowing up. And I promised my wife I'd take her and get some new carpet for the house. Right. And she finally said, just pick the doggone thing up. I'm tired of it ringing. And it was a diesel mechanic. So that's God's sense of humor was, I'm not going to do the next call. I'll let you sweat it for a little bit, but it'll be the call after that.
As you said earlier in the first hour, yes, and in fact, it's amazing. It was sort of synchronicity. I basically described the show as this show can't be pigeonholed because I have a variety of guests, in which you just basically said the same thing when you came on the air. But I've had a lot of folks on that have said that that people need to prepare for survival for a myriad of events. Planet X being one of them, anarchy, martial law. I mean, you name it, nukes dropping down, Chinese invasion, whatnot. So, but none of them have ever got to the point to the physical manifestation of a survivable town unit in development. They've always been sort of saying people need to, the folks I've had on said people need to get together. They need to count on their neighbor, but yet there's no plan. You from what you're telling me, you're so far from that. You've got tractors on the ground. You've got plans laid out. You've got infrastructure being, you're manifesting this thing, which I have known. That's why I'm really having you on the show, Jeff, because nobody I've ever talked to has got this far. Is this something that you feel like can be replicated?
Oh, absolutely. We've been offered other properties from Canada, North Carolina, Texas, Arkansas. There were 5 states. I'm forgetting one. And we're just not ready to take this to the next level. I mean, we literally have money parked outside the project. Our director of finance lives in a world where you buy and sell large real estate investments. And there's a little law that if you make money off of real estate, you got 12 months to park it in more real estate or you got to pay capital gains tax, essentially. And so he has 2 investors that have more money than I've ever seen in my life that are ready to wave checks at us to start replicating this as a commercial real estate development. And I am going to be a stickler because I've got 8 very talented people running our board of directors at this point. And, it doesn't matter how big a checkbook is. If I can't take my team with me in this to the next level, then we're just not going to get to the next level, and we'll do it one member at a time. But when we get there and we're ready to bring in construction crews from all over the country to get this thing built in a hurry in, multiple of tracks and thousands of acres and thousands of units at a time, I'll get as many people as there are to a safer place. But at the same time, I'll also give them a viable investment vehicle to be in, and that is real estate. I mean, we're talking about kingdom assets, animals, food, gold, silver, real estate, homes, stuff that you can hold and own. And in the future, if there's no event and we all really were just a little crazy and coincidentally fell into each other and there wasn't a higher hand in this to put it together on the outside of this to the rest of the world, our investors are going to say, my gosh, I'd have never done anything different, because you're talking about, we took a patch of woods and we made it into a resort, and now look at what this thing is worth. And so to me, at the end of the day, if nothing happens 10 years from now and all of our people can say this about what we did, then we've still accomplished a great thing for a lot of people.
Well, you just threw a number out there. The person from NASA that was doing the research, did they come up with a time frame scenario?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yep.
What is it?
Look, I don't have any problem looking foolish if it doesn't happen. I mean, I pray every day that it doesn't, but it'll be before the end of this year.
Oh, it would be October 17th, would it?
Well, I was born on October 6th, so I kind of have a feeling that it might be around that time.
Wow. Okay, man. So yeah, well, and then, now, what do you recommend for those that are not being called down to the microtown in development? As far as preparedness, what do you recommend the basic needs, the things that people should have in their own sphere of influence where they're located?
Okay, well, this is the pragmatic part of this. Let's say that things go crazy at the end of the growing season. I mean, just at that that first possible day that you can't get a seed in the ground and have growable food before the winter comes. So let's say that's sometime in late August. Okay, so you got to have enough food to go from late August until, at the very least, the end of March. And that is, if you got a greenhouse and you can get going early on stuff, you still have to capture sunlight to grow these things. To grow enough food to eat, you got to go at least 6 months of, you can figure out what your BMR is, and for everybody, height, weight, age, activity level, it's all different. But, there are all kind of BMR calculators on the internet. So figure that out. Okay. And add your calories up. And I can help people with grocery lists if they want to, on how to get cheap food stored up in calories in a hurry, and how to get enough survival seeds put away to where for literally less than $500, we can have enough food in store and enough seeds ready to go to get you through if you do it the right way. And then the next thing is going to be, let's go ahead and entertain the thought that there might be something that poisons the atmosphere for a while, that you have to get yourself clean air, clean water, and in a place where you're protected. All right?
Okay.
Get yourself a good shovel and a place on your land that you have enough to dig a hole big enough to lay in a pond liner, and get yourself some timbers, and then throw at least 4 feet of earth over those timbers. And so if you're talking about an 8-foot span, check with the contractor and make sure your deflection codes are right. But you're going to need 2x12s, and you're going to need these 2x12s if you want to be safe. You want to brace these things up every 6 inches. So I'm not telling people to go ahead and do this without checking with anyone. The last thing I want to do is to get someone that wants to be safe hurt. Right. So check with a local contractor, because you're talking about moving a lot of dirt. If you're going to build yourself a cellar that's under earth and set up a ventilation system that's going to clean the air, get yourself good water purifiers, and make sure that you have everything in there ready to go and watertight and checkable. Because if you get a big rain and that water gets in there and mildews all your food up and spoils your water, everything you've just done is for naught, because now you just have a hole in the ground and you're still going to starve or dehydrate yourself to death. So other than the cost of the timbers, you've just got labor. And if you don't have land, you need to buddy up with someone that does have land, because you need to start practicing growing food. The time to put seeds in the ground and pray that something comes up is before the event. After the event, you need to grow food. So get yourself a couple of window planters and start practicing this winter in how to grow food even when you don't have full summer sun, and figure out what you need in fertilizer in your soil. And quite frankly, if you do it in a greenhouse environment, you're going to need about 400 square feet of greenhouse per person. If you're going to do a little warm water and cold water fish, if you got some wood burning stove that you can put in there and pipe a little warm air and get a little bit of that CO2. You see, plants love CO2. We don't. They do. That CO2 from burning that little wood burner stove will help you out through the winter, and it might help you get food growing a little better. But you got to practice early, because if this thing's going to hit sometime before the beginning of winter next year, or I'm sorry, at the end of this year, and everything goes helter-skelter, you've got a good 6 months to practice, and, that last 3 months, 4 months, whatever, 9, 10 months, you're really going to want things ready to go. And so I'm trying to get anyone that will listen in a place where they're not in a panic mode. If you get a plan together and you start practicing, it's not time to panic, and you don't have to spend a fortune on it.
Yeah, the best time to plan is when you don't have to.
Yeah. And so you don't have to become a nut. I'm not a nut, I mean, if you saw me walking down the street, you'd say, well, that guy's got a little bit of a gut. But, you wouldn't think I looked any different than most people. Okay. But, at the same time, what I've done to put my family in a place that I don't worry about our survival, it's in God's hands. I mean, I've done a lot of work. My wife's done a lot of work to get us here. But at this point, the stuff that we can't control, it's in God's hand, and we pray every day that we do what He commands us to do and shows us the way when we can't understand. And, to me, that's the most important prep of all, and that one's free.
Sounds like the best way to survive and the smallest way to survive to start is to have a helpmeet by your side to make sure you can both get through it, and then you can work from there. And it sounds like you've got that going, Jeff, so congratulations on that. All right, we're at the end of the broadcast. Jeff Harness, anything you'd like to say about your website and or how people can get a hold of you? You go right ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, I know we didn't talk about it much, but it's pretty simple. myozarkhomestead.com. You can get a hold of us through there or through the 800 number. It's 844 My Ozark, and so that's myozarkhomestead.com or 844 My Ozark, and we hope to hear from you. And if it's in the cards, we're going to bring you home.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, Jeff, I appreciate you coming on the broadcast. And if we're still here later in the year, and you begin to hit that second stage of your project, then maybe we'll have you back on to talk about it. How about that?
Oh, I would love to. And you know what? I'm a good sport. If we make it all the way to Christmas and you want to have me on and your listeners want to laugh about it, I'm up for that too. I would just love for that to happen.
All right. Jeff Harness, thanks so much for coming on the broadcast tonight then.
All right, Daniel. Thanks a bunch. Good night.
You bet. Bye-bye. All right, everybody, that was Jeff Harness all the way from the Missouri Ozarks talking about myozarkhomestead.com. And I have that in the leader title there on our website right now, right behind me, right above my head. Be sure to stop by next week. We're going to have with us, let's look on our list here, and let me scroll down. We're going to have Trish and Rob McGregor on the program, and they're going to be talking about sensing the future, talking about the future. What does it hold? And can a person know what's in the future? Does God speak to us in unctions and feelings and thoughts and visions and dreams? We'll find out next week with Trish and Rob McGregor. And in 2 weeks, Timothy Beckley is going to be with us, talking about the secret UFO files. Tim Swartz, following week, talking about Tesla and Hollow Earth on that one. Then we're going to have Maria DeAndrea talking about Christian metaphysics. What in the heck is that? Is that even possible? Can them two worlds exist in the same space? We'll find out. Then finally, to finish that month up, is going to be Margot, who claims she's talked to extra-dimensional contacts. We'll find out about that. Well, if you enjoyed this program, you can watch it again to begin to replay in our main player directly here in about a few minutes, and we'll upload the high-definition extract of the video, interview only on our YouTube channel. We'll podcast it and put it into our TuneIn radio playlist. That's a wrap for tonight. Thanks you everyone for your great questions about Jeff Harness's project down there in the Ozarks. Be sure to stop by the website. Just take a look. See if you can pick up some tips to survive where you are. Daniel Ott for The Edge. Bye-bye.